Ned, maybe I could start with you, which is, Claire in her introduction said that this was the third iteration of the same story and that there were two other versions. So, I mean, it works really well as a standalone film, but perhaps you could explain how this film relates to the other two versions that she mentioned.
Sure. When we all set out to do this, I had written this 223-page script, which was meant to be in two parts, called Him and Her, which we played last year at the Toronto Film Festival and which just opened in the States last week. And, you know, I wanted to write a comedy. No, I'm kidding. Basically, I wanted to show a relationship from both perspectives of the relationship. I wanted to show two people going through difficulty together and how they deal and cope with it in two completely different ways, which was a 3-hour and 10-minute two-part experience. So for certain people, you're into going and sitting through that, but we created this third film out of that, which is what you just saw. So ultimately, I created this film in an editing room, and that's how we got to it.
And I'm kind of interested from your point of view, James, as a performer, given the almost unique nature of the project. Did you have any sort of trepidations taking the role?
No, because out of the idea to do the unique thing of the two different sort of perspectives, which you kind of still, I think, get a sense of in the combined movie, but which is more present in the him and her versions of the movie. Out with that, you just had two movies that worked really well independently, I think, as well. And that was the important thing. I think if you're going to go and do two movies that are really good together and kind of like meh apart, then you shouldn't really do it. But independently, you've got a writer and a director who writes this kind of magical, beautiful, poetic, tragic love story about loss and grief and connections and perspective, and that's all sort of transcendent and beautiful, and we get lots of that, even though we need that. But what I thought Ned did really brilliantly was make it really adult and really sort of complicated and difficult, and those are all the things that, for me, real love and real loss is as well. It's beautiful and poetic, but it's totally mundane and adult and complicated, and I thought he did that so well together. He managed to make a real contemporary relationship that still managed to achieve poetic beauty and romance at the same time.
And you say that the film is an exploration of kind of loss and the end of an affair and grief, and these are quite kind of difficult, dark issues. So I guess, I guess this is another question from you as a performer. Was the shoot kind of an emotionally challenging experience because of?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's not a massive characterization. It's not a character that I found it hard to find. And the thing that defines him is the loss of his wife and the loss of his child in this time in his life anyway. And it sort of defines him in this movie. That's not, I don't know, I don't even think you need to have kids to be able to perhaps identify and latch onto that as an actor or as a viewer or as a person in life. So it was never really hard to sort of find or get into the movie or the story or the character. It was just hard being in the character, if you know what I mean, and that was a tough time. But what that weirdly meant was that we ended up having a hell of a lot of fun on set, because I don't know, I always feel you've got to save the sad for when the camera's rolling. You've got to save the kind of save the crying for the camera a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Not that it's all about crying, but like, you know, you've got it's that you can't be like, oh, I'm having a terrible time in between takes and then expect to be able to carry that same energy in. There's a different reality that happens between action and cut than there is between sort of like, right, cut and let's set up for the next shot. There was a real camaraderie, and it's not necessarily interesting to you guys, but we had a great time making this movie. So thanks for coming and seeing it and supporting that great time. But there was, I don't know, there was a real team on this movie, and I don't think you could make 3 movies in the time it takes to make half a movie in a city like New York without leaders like these two, but also without a great script and without an amazing team who responded to the leadership of yourself, really, I have to say, and gave of themselves so much. But that always makes people have a good time, even if it is about the direst or the most unhappy of stuff, you know.
And Cassandra, I mean, you know, for all sorts of reasons, I mean, it's a film about, as James and Ned have been saying, kind of adult issues. It's kind of, you know, it kind of demands a lot of the audience, but it's still kind of very absorbing. But I guess adult dramas are not really kind of, they're quite thin on the ground when one thinks of what's coming out of Hollywood. So I guess, was this a challenge for you to put together as a producer?
It wasn't in some ways, because it was such a unique experience that we were offering. People knew automatically, like, I don't know what to do with that, that's frightening, and they took 2 steps back, or they dove right in. So we had the passion either way. And the people who did sign on, from crew to cast to financiers, they all believed in this unique project and that the audience would also feel the way they did. So we were really lucky with that. And in a weird way, if you just have like a sort of regular standard film, you know, sometimes people just want to work, so they just sign on to your movie. They're not going to just sign on to your movie because they need work on this one. We're asking for a long commitment. We're not paying you very well, and you have to be in it for the love. Sorry, it's true.
I just want to add that, you know, I started writing this 10 years ago, at least the first part of the project, and, you know, this is a person who put her feet on the ground and believed in it from day one, and I wouldn't be standing here, nor would James, nor would you been able to see this movie or the other movies for that fact if it weren't for this woman right here. She's an amazing partner, and she deserves a ton of the credit. So
I will ask you to go see the other movies too, though.
It's all part of the same project, but when I started doing this, no, I sort of started with the idea of this 2-part him and her perspective, and that's what we were running with. That was the script that we were working with. That's what we shot. You know, that's what for a year we you know, like, killed ourselves for until we premiered those 2 films in Toronto last year, and the Weinstein Company picked them up. So we sort of ran headlong into that, and anytime someone was like, you should really think about combining them, I sort of pushed it off, because I think if we'd had that attitude going into shooting, I would have compromised. And I think I couldn't compromise in terms of just getting through shooting. Afterward is a different story, because you're dealing with distribution, and you're dealing with audiences, and you're dealing with a whole other world. So within the festival world, a 3-hour and 10-minute 2-part movie film plays. But in the real world and out in, you know, the financial world where a distributor puts these things out there, it's a different landscape. So, you know, I created this 3rd film to sort of broaden our own landscape, because we made this little difficult art film, you know, and I just wanted it to have the broadest reach that it could.
I've never had so much fun throwing food at a person as I had throwing iron-rich, leafy products in his face. He's lovely. He's really lovely. We had an amazing script on this project, but one of the things that I've got so much respect for, and I will get to Bill, for Ned for as well, is that he would let people go as well, you know. He would let people bring something else to the table. And Bill, obviously, with the training that he's got, Bill Hader is a man who, if you're not familiar with him in this country as much, he's also really famous in America for Saturday Night Live and the improvisational and sort of devising of 1 million scenes a week, every week, on a Friday night. On Saturday night, that's why it's called Saturday Night Live. and it's good that I'm not in programming, isn't it? Or in the TV Times. So he was amazing at doing that, and getting to work with somebody that sort of, when you work with somebody who's so good at that kind of stuff, it makes you better at that kind of stuff as well, and you kind of like absorb their power while you're around them, and that was really, and that was really, really fun. He's a lovely guy as well, so no, it was nice, because you've got to, in the him side of things, his family outside of his father, he's really only got his father, so his family is his friendship with him and with Nina Arianda, and that's kind of it. So it was important to get a kind of a brotherly bond there, and I felt that that was really easy to make with him, and he's a great character. Why did I?
Yes. Was your choice? Was your choice?
When I come into a job, I kind of come in the first day, I'm like, this is what I'm doing, this is the accent I want to do. And if you don't like that, you can frankly off.
No, sorry.
No,
I thought
he was an American character in an American movie, and that's the way it was written. He was the son of, in the script it didn't say he was an Irishman, but it worked out that I was the son of an Irishman. But born and bred in New York, so it would have been perverse to be going like, hey man, I'm pure New York, by the way. I went to Cooper Union and all that. Yeah, it's a lot easier. It is a lot easier, actually. Also, the fact that you've got a good script that demands more of you as an actor weirdly makes it easier. It's harder to do a more simplistic script that doesn't really get into the heart of a character more, because you've got to do more acting with less scene, if you like. Whereas this, you've got a whole movie which you know, tries not to leave any stone unturned. In terms of being very real, it was actually sort of, I feel, you know, not to sort of stereotype or give labels to different countries' types of movies and stuff like that, but I do think there's a style of acting in the movie which maybe I've not done a lot, which at times it was really sort of apparent when we were making the movie, and Ned would be like, fucking do less. And you know what I mean, because I do a lot usually. And that was really interesting to be a part of. It felt like I was being a part of an American system of acting, not a system, but an American kind of accent on acting. Do you know what I mean? Which was something I'd never really done before. Even when I'd done American things before, like Civil War drama and stuff, it was still costume drama, it was still courtroom drama, it was declamatory, and it was still auditory and all that kind of stuff, whereas this one was much more about just a kind of, that kind of acting. It wasn't hard to get into that at all, and I don't really think, I think I said it earlier in this very Q&A, that I don't think you have to have kids to imagine the depth or the scale of that kind of grief or that kind of pain. I think anybody with a decent level of imagination or empathy can guess at it. Being a father makes it easier to connect with it immediately. It was never hard to get into character. It's not a massive characterization. He's more entitled than I am. He's had it easier, I suppose, upbringing wise and all that kind of stuff. But really, he's not a million miles away. It was easy to get into that character, but it was just hard living in it every day, and it was hard not to take a bit of that home and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's all about imagination and imagining what it's like to live in somebody else's shoes, and that's partly what acting is, but that's partly what it's like just being a responsible and respectful human being in the world, is imagining what it's like to be somebody else in front of you and having the imagination and the empathy to kind of like see the world from somebody else's perspective, you know. And if you could do that, then everybody would make 2 movies called Him and Her. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and that's what this movie does. It's, if you've ever had that argument with your significant other or a disagreement, and you can't for the life of you understand why they can't see that you're right, and they can't for the life of them understand why you can't see that they're right, and or not even right, but just can't see what it is that they need, then I think definitely the Him and Her movies, and I think there's still a bit of it contained within them, which sort of experiments with that. And the Him and Her movies, they're really not like a movie and its sequel. It's an experience of watching 2 movies that live alongside each other and complement and contradict each other, you know, is to go off on one, but yeah.